I'll get started, and I want to thank Senator Tillis, Senator Blumenthal for being here. And Senator Blumenthal, we mentioned your leadership on the App Store bill. Thank you. As the daughter of a newspaperman, I have watched closely as local journalism has seen its content and ad revenue siphoned off by digital platforms like Google and Facebook. You mentioned this, Mr. Kent. How has Google leveraged its monopoly power to squeeze publishers like local newspapers out of ad revenue that they would receive if there was a competitive market?
Over time, Google and Facebook, Google in particular, have absorbed most of the incremental growth in the industry, and they've done that by a pervasive collection of data across the web. Google has tags and pixels and listening devices basically on nearly 80% of the top 1 million websites. Facebook does across 8 million plus websites, according to regulator data and research. So they're collecting and mining data across the web and using that to generate the most profits possible because they dominate the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. From your perspective, working directly with publishers, what are the biggest threats to publishers from a few tech giants controlling almost every aspect of the tech ecosystem? How are you addressing those threats?
Well, antitrust is key to us because most of the downstream harms that we've seen, whether it be lower quality content, disinformation, not being able to fund journalism in newsrooms, data abuse, concerns about censorship and the way those are all downstream harms from what's upstream, which is a perverse amount of market power by just a couple companies. And so anything in the area of antitrust or data protection that actually aligns the consumer's interests with the content and the news and entertainment that they actually want to consume is very valuable. Other legislation like what you're working on with the JCPA, where there's a duty then to correct imbalances in bargain power, is also very important to the future.
Okay, thank you. One of the concerns that we have discussed here, and I've heard from both publishers as well as advertisers, is that there's no way to verify limited data that Google and Facebook provide about where ads are shown, to whom, and for what price. Even you, Mr. Henderson, Professor Henderson, that doesn't agree with this bill, have noted that transparency is a good thing. One example of this, Facebook was sued by advertisers in 2018 for lying about how many people an ad could reach. What information about ads do you think should be provided to advertisers and publishers by ad platforms? And the secondary question, how has a lack of competition empowered Google and Facebook to limit transparency? So why don't you get at that? Because I believe that this bill would help give advertisers greater insight into what's going on and whether their digital ad campaigns are even effective. It's hard to know. So anyone want to take any bit of that about what information you think it should be provided, and also what we could do better?
Sure. Thanks, Senator. One thing that Professor Henderson mentioned, and this is sort of thrown around a lot, is that the price of ads has just gone down. So nothing to see here, folks. One of the things that the bill does, which I think is great, is it requires brokers to disclose certain information to advertisers. And that information will allow them to audit whether what they're buying is good quality or whether what they're buying is bad quality. And so one of the things that might happen is finally we'll be able to actually measure whether in fact the effective price of ads is going down or whether it's going up.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add one other small comment, and that is that, you would think that the publishers and the advertisers would both know what the price was for the impression that was sold. The advertisers know what they paid, the publishers know what they received, but neither the publisher nor the advertiser know what the costs in the middle were. And so there's a disjunction of knowledge about what publishers received and what advertisers paid because this intermediary margins are really, really large. Mm-hmm. And it would be like having a stock trade without knowing what the ultimate price was, or a sale of a home without a closing sheet. And so that's a very simple example of transparency.
Mr. Lynn.
Yes, thank you. In an earlier life, I ran a magazine called Global Business. It was a 100,000 circulation business. Magazine. It was 4-color, perfect bound, 96-page monthly magazine. We lived 100% off of advertising. One of the things that we did in this this period a long time ago is we spent about 7% of our revenue every year auditing our readership to make sure that advertisers understood exactly who they were getting and how they're getting it. That was a long time ago. That was essentially before the internet. I would say that advertisers back then were better served than they are right now.
Okay, very good.
Oh,
Yeah,
go
Mr.
ahead.
No, go,
No, please,
Professor
ma'am.
Henderson. I'll go back to, I have one last question our colleagues have to.
Okay, I just want to add, I said I was for transparency, and I think that's fine. I think, Louis Brandeis said it well, shine a light on things, as you said, Senator Klobuchar, when we started. I should note, though, that's a little bit misleading because, as I mentioned, Google, the UK Market Authority found that Google's rate that they charge is in line with their competitors. And if nobody had any idea how much these intermediaries were taking, they would have incentives to Google could get away with charging anything because nobody knows what they're charging. They're charging a market rate, the market rate of their competitors. And I'll note that the average large publisher will use 6 different ad platforms in a year, and the average advertiser will use 3 different platforms. So it's not like this is the only game in town. And if Google is fleecing everybody, I'm from the University of Chicago, so I'm contractually obligated to say that I believe in markets. And if Google was absolutely fleecing people, given that the average person uses 6 or 3 or 6 different other ad alternatives, they would be taking their business to those places. Now, if they are, as you said, Senator, committing fraud by deliberately misleading people, then we should have no tolerance for that. We should go after them. But the threshold for breaking them up, I think, should be a lot higher than that.
Okay, Mr. Kent, you want to respond?
I was just going to say that, I heard the point earlier from Professor Henderson why stocks are different than advertising. I don't think we're arguing they're the same thing. But advertising in digital is a high volume. We heard the numbers from Roger that the volume of advertising impressions per day at that rate, the average ad translates to about less than a penny per advertising. That's ripe for fraud. Those are the types of markets, large volume, low price. A CEO of an ad tech company recently told me that Google and the Trade Desk are non-transparent black holes. Nobody has any clue what's going on inside them. And so we need to actually have some transparency because the way it translates is that local publisher gets a check every month from Google, and they have no idea what's behind it.
Okay, one last example I want to use of my own experience with this. And why I know that they have info and they're targeting people. One of the ways that Google is able to leverage its market power to disadvantage its competitors is by drawing on that vast amount of personal data it has on people, as well as the lack of any federal privacy legislation to limit how it can use the data. So you have this twofer problem. So I wanted to show this ad only because, so this is a pop-up ad against the self-preferencing bill. Okay, and I only find it funny because I do want to thank the lawyers of Google who put that little could in there. So it says, Senator Klobuchar with the little, my colleagues will enjoy this, could break Google Maps, okay? This gives me a lot of power, Senator Lee. What?
Just the context froze me.
Yeah, I know.
You don't want it to suggest you could break. That's not the
Well,
message.
that's exactly, I do wonder about it. And if we want to look at the other ones and show these, I'm going to get to the punchline in a minute. These are harder to see, but these went all over the place. That I would erase Amazon Basics and that I would break, this one is interesting, another little could, break FaceTime. Okay, so who saw these? Members of Congress saw these. So these were targeted in Washington, D.C. for members of Congress when they were home against the bill, and this is part of the over $200 million advertising campaign put forth by Chamber of Progress, or as I call them, Chamber of Lack of Progress, which is the big tech companies' front group. And so, but what is interesting to me is I heard about these ads from who? Other members of Congress. They were targeted, so they saw them. I'm not going to put their names forward on this thing, but I had multiple calls by members of Congress. So I guess I would ask you, Ms. Srinivasan, if that surprises you, that they would be able to have this data to target people, so they scare them from supporting our bills because they don't want to have these really scary ads that they're breaking into be put up on sites where people are just looking up TV shows like I was doing. Okay, go ahead.
It doesn't surprise me. When Google bought DoubleClick way back when, one of the things that it promised to do was to keep customers' data separate. Of course, it purchased DoubleClick, and then after it gained market power, it started to use that information, and it can use that information now for different trading purposes, whether it's to hyper-target ads like that. That is data that's originated on the publisher side, on the seller side, that Google is gaining by virtue of its position as publisher's broker, and now it's using it on the other side to target ads and to inflate its trading revenue. And so that's one of the things that this bill would target and prohibit.
Exactly. And of course, the ultimate interesting part is they're using it to target people on a bill, using their own monopoly power to target a bill that tries to do something about their monopoly power. So I just think it shows what we're up against, but it also has to be revealed to the public. So with that, I'm going to turn over